Continuous improvement comes in lots of different flavors and styles. I'm Bella Engelbach, and I'm inviting you to journey with me to the edges of lean. Episode 98, Continuous Improvement and Staying Flowcused with Stéfany Oliver. An important principle of lean thinking is one-piece flow. One way of looking at that is to focus on finishing what you start before you take on other tasks, whether that's building a car in a factory or managing paperwork or cooking dinner. But our lives constantly call us to multitask and take on more than we can possibly complete, and as a result, we get overwhelmed. Lean coach Stéfany Oliver has been studying how to overcome that feeling of overwhelm in our lives, and she has written a book to help us all. Stéfany Oliver, welcome to the Edges of Lean.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, what a pleasure to have you here today. I know you've just come back from a big trip, and I want to hear a little bit about that. But before you get into that, I would love to have you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, what you do, and about your pathway to doing what you do today.
Sounds good. Thank you, Bella. Well, my name is Stéfany Oliver. I am a lean management coach at Statistics Canada, so our national statistical agency here in Canada. And I'm also growing my business as a wellness and optimization coach to help people beat the overwhelm and get into a good flow in their day-to-day.
So flow is something we talk about a lot in lean, and you're talking about it in people's personal lives. How did you get into that? Is that something that was a parallel path with your work? Does it come out of your career? Tell me about that.
I think it definitely all stems from lean.
Yeah.
Back in 2016, when I came back from my first maternity leave, I took my first ever lean training course. So it was an introduction to lean for government. And that's when I started being more familiar with the concepts of flow and just lean in general. And I was immediately captured and mesmerized by the power of lean thinking, not just in our work setting, but in our day-to-day, because those lessons are just so transferable into everything that we do. So as I endeavored to become a full-time lean coach, which I eventually, did lots of training and reading and application and experience and everything, and became a full-time lean coach in my organization back in 2019, then I started, applying these notions, not just in the work setting, but at home, and helping others do the same in order to get to this better flow of our day, which is really all about the energy that goes through, we talk about the energy going through our processes and making sure that there are no obstacles to that happening and creating the value. And I see it very much the same way with our day-to-day, as we have, we are basically the energy flowing through our day-to-day, and some things come to create obstacles and interrupt that flow, and other things can really help to fuel that energy so that we can create the highest value possible.
You're really in that position right now of being a working mom with a business, so you are certainly in that place where being overwhelmed is just, I think most of us would say, well, of course you're going to be overwhelmed, right? There's going to be so much. There's going to be, spouse, kids, school, work, health. I mean, so many things that can interrupt that flow.
Yes.
So can you give us an example from, if you're willing to, from your own life, just make it real for us.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I would say, even to add to that list, with a baby on the way, and I'm not only a coach at work, I'm also a leader. So I manage a team. So yeah, there's a lot of things pulling at my energy and my attention and my focus. And so one of the things that I really make sure to do is to set limits around some specific things in order to ensure that the right things are flowing well. And this is what my new ebook is all about. It's about setting limits on 4 specific key elements in order to what I call stay focused. So it's this mixture of flow and focus in order to help you bring your best self to every area of your life. And so as a concrete example, I mean, I really need some quiet time, as you can imagine, with all of these people and things demanding my energy. And one of the things that I really ensure I do is to bookend my days. So I have my morning power time that I call and my evening peaceful time, which can vary from sometimes 5 minutes to half an hour or an hour, depending on, the day. But usually a good 15-20 minutes is enough for me, or maybe a little bit more in the morning, just to set my day, ground my day really nicely and get into that flow. Because I've noticed a few years ago, especially like pre-pandemic or, early pandemic, where if I didn't get that time, I was miserable all day. And not only that, I was making others miserable. And I didn't have the energy to respond in a kind way to my daughter or to my husband too. So it really helps me to ground, my intention for the day. I mean, I do Bible study, so I do that. I pray, I meditate, I do some stretches. And this really helps me ground the day in a nice intention. And the days that for whatever reason it doesn't happen, which are rare now because I have such a good routine, I can feel it. The overwhelm comes up very much more easily. And so, yeah, and to me, it's all about setting limits around everything else. So meaning I'm not going to look at my phone, to see who emailed me, who messaged me on this social media or that. I'm not going to go downstairs and start, putting lunches together. I'm literally going to go to my spot in my bedroom before anything else. And that's what I'm going to do. And that's the first thing that will start my day.
So that requires setting limits on yourself or creating that opportunity for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Not having the phone there, not worrying about the other stuff. But it seems to me that also requires some cooperation from the rest of the family. So how and can I ask how old your daughter is?
She's 8 now.
She's 8. Okay.
Yes.
So she's old enough to understand.
She's old enough to understand. And it's funny you say that, because just this morning, I started, and her and my husband, she had crept into bed and they were playing around. I said, okay, everybody, I'm having my quiet time. It's time to be quiet. And, sometimes they like to tease, so they're trying to do different jokes. And I'm like, do I need to leave? This is what I told them. I said, do I need to leave? Because I will leave and go do my stuff somewhere else. And they looked at me like, oh, she's serious. And so, they quieted down and gave me that time. So yeah. And oftentimes, I mean, I personally prefer to do it when everybody's still sleeping, to be honest. That is the best, because then I don't have to deal with any of that interrupting play. And, it's nice that they're so playful and whatnot. So I don't like to interrupt it, but, respecting the boundary and the limit is really important.
Yeah. So, and again, it's about your clarity about the boundary, right, Stéfany?
Yeah.
But communicating it to other folks in a kind way, right?
Yes.
It's not about, well, I need my time and too bad for the rest of you.
Yeah. And they know when I'm done, I have time, energy. I'm in a good mood. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think it's a great model for children as well, to show that, this is what mom needs. And once she gets it, then she's way better able to meet your needs.
That's great. So tell me a little bit more about this idea about the flow of energy in the day. in lean, we're talking about flow. We talk about the flow of a product, or the flow of something that we're working on, and how we want. We talk about single piece flow. So you're only working on one thing at a time and not trying to multitask, which is such a temptation. But what does that mean for energy, Stéfany? How does that work?
Yeah, well, I was inspired by, I don't know if you know France Bergeron and Joanne Godet. They wrote a book called Lean Manage Work as a Flow System. And they use a definition of flow that says that flow is the energy moving through a system, which could be a process, an organization. And I'm applying it to the day-to-day. And it's really work as effort, right? So you're putting in effort and it's flowing in order to get to the end product, which is the value creation. And this whole concept of managing work as a flow system, I'm thinking links directly to managing our day-to-day as a flow system. Because again, there are things that come and fuel our energy, things like good food, rest, play, good interactions that are really positive, kindness. There's a lot of different things that come and fuel that energy. And it's pretty, there are some standards like rest and sleep and good food, but it's pretty unique to each individual as well, right? There are some things that fuel me that may not fuel you just as much. And so knowing that is really key. And then there's also things that come and kind of suck that energy out, right? And so identifying those things that fuel and the things that create these interruptions or really take away that energy are really key in order to be able to manage our day as a flow system. And so that's what I like to explore, is the synergy between, okay, do I know what I need? I have a friend who, through, just kind of coaching her informally, she determined that what she needs is 3 hours outside per day. And she's a single mom of a boy who's 5 years old. And, she said, I need that time. Some of that time I needed alone. Some of that time I needed with my son, because, he needs to take that energy out as well. And so 3 hours per day. So she sets limits around everything else happening in her life in order for her to get that 3 hours per day. And for most people, it's like, that's a lot of time outside. I wish I could do that, but that's what she needs. That's what she determines she needs in order to bring her best to, her family and her work and all of her other, passion projects. Yeah.
So when you're thinking about the value coming out of that system, Stéfany, what is it for you at the end of the day? What makes you look back and say, yeah, that was my flow today generated the value. What is that value you're looking for?
Yeah, and for me, it links back to intention, right? What is my intention for the day, or what is my purpose in life generally? And so, of course, that's different for every person. But for me, even from a personal or family oriented perspective, I want my connection with, my kids and my husband to be positive, to leave them feeling positive, to be kind, and to just be in that really, again, positive space. And I want to be able to live out my intention and my purpose of helping people create a better daily flow. So going back to that intention, if I don't have the energy to do that, then I can't live out that purpose for my life. I can't really be there for my family in the way that they need support from a mom, from a homemaker, and all of that. Yeah.
It sounds like what you're saying then is that you really need to start with intention. What is it that your intention is, what your mission is, to start there before even diving into, do I need 3 hours outside, or do I need 10 minutes in the morning, or whatever it is? But what is the value that I am hoping to create?
That's it, Bella, you got it. It all goes back to the why.
Yeah. So for you,
how do you carry this back then into the workplace? Because you know, I always said this, the wonderful thing about work is people, and the thing that makes work hard is people.
Yes. You're so right. Yeah. So, I mean, bringing it back into the workplace, if I can kind of go back to the 4 key elements that I put together for the concept of staying focused, they are focus, time, space, and capacity. And really, those 4 key elements are applicable to every area of our lives, right? And especially for work, what I find, I mean, let's just take focus for an example. You mentioned one piece flow. I mean, we just try to do too many things at the same time, whether it's at work or at home. Let's think about it, right? We do way too much. We start too many things. We don't finish them. And focusing on this idea of focus, of, you know, one piece flow, doing one thing at a time, or really just focusing on the person or the task that is in front of you. I mean, it's the ultimate proof of respect, right? There was a Harvard study that said that 47% of the time we are thinking about something else than we're actually doing. And I mean, that's pretty high, 47%. But at the end of the day, I'm like, yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. So now I have like these sticky notes saying 47% all around my office to remind me, especially when we're meeting with someone, that especially in a virtual world, the temptation is, oh, I'm going to just respond to that email. Or, you know, especially if it's a group meeting, people have their cameras off and they start, you know, working. And to me, that is ultimate disrespect, right? Like, if you're there, you should be there. You should be paying attention. You should be focusing. And so I think about that 47% a lot. And I try to, it really is, it goes back to discipline, right? Discipline of being aware when your mind is wandering, when you're talking to either one person or in a group, or even working on a task, because our brains are so wired now to get that dopamine rush, that quick hit of like, send an email, quick, okay, I did a task, send another email, okay, I did another task. Now you get that dopamine and you feel good, right? That feel good hormone. But working heads down on a task that takes a long time is getting more and more difficult for us to do, because we are starting to get conditioned to, you know, get that quick hit. So even paying attention to someone speaking in a meeting, or really truly listening. Imagine you're a leader and you're going to the Gemba, you're trying to learn from the employee, but then your mind starts wandering. Oh, I have to do this task and that task, or, you know, I have to cook supper tonight. What am I going to make? And I think that's just a natural tendency for our brains, but we have to rewire. We have to really build in that discipline to refocus back to who and or what is in front of us. Because again, that, to me, that's the ultimate proof of respect.
I think there's something that I'd like to add to that, Stéfany,
Yeah.
which is that everybody's brain is wired differently, right? So some people are more wired for attention than
Yes.
others, right? But it is a spectrum, if I can use that
Yes.
word, of people's ability to attend to what's in front of them. And I wonder if it's helpful for people to also start to experiment and understand themselves, to say, what is my actual attention span? Now, you can't stop thoughts from coming into your head.
Yes.
Right? You don't want to feel guilty about what your brain does naturally, but you know, how long am I able to do this?
Yeah.
And then perhaps, you know, design your work so you're not pushing yourself to limits that are very, very difficult for you, but you're just finding kind of that edge, and then maybe moving it out just a little bit. Because I know that you know, not everybody can do that immediately.
Yeah, you're totally right. And that's a fantastic point. And it's great that you mentioned that, because it relates to, I set up a focus continuum in my Stay Focused ebook. And the first step is to know. It sounds silly,
Yeah.
but to really know, because if you know, for example, that hour-long meetings on Teams or Zoom are too much for you to handle, then what's the limit you're going to set? Well, you're not going to do hour-long Zoom or Teams meeting, right? You're going to make sure that when you set up meetings, you set them up for shorter period of time, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever, and that you let your team know and anyone else know this is what you can handle. Again, going back to what we were saying earlier about setting that boundary respectfully, right? Because if you know this is what you can handle and any more will kind of take you over the edge, well, you want to be able to bring your best self, again, to each area, right? And if you know that 5 meetings of an hour per day is too much for you, then what do we need to do? Like you said, where's the threshold, right? What do we need to do? And so the first step is to know that. It's really all about knowing yourself. We are so unique and we each have unique needs. And it's so important to discover that. And it might change over time too, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay. You just have to, keep a pulse on it.
That's great. I really appreciate that. Yeah. So you've talked about these 4 focus areas, these 4 pillars. Can you dive into another one for us?
Sure. I mean, the second one, so first one was time, focus. The second one is time. And we've talked a little bit about time. And for me, there's sort of a part of the knowing and the discovering is knowing what's your energy level like throughout the day.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How does it fluctuate? Do I seem to have more energy and focus and attention in the morning or in the afternoon or in the evening? Right. So then the harder tasks, perhaps, you focus them on the areas where you have a bit more energy. And then you bring in the layer of motivation, because that's also, there might be some times throughout the day where you have more motivation than others. And again, depending on the type of task as well. And I think about, cooking and cleaning, I mean, we don't always have the motivation to do those things. So can time, like a different time throughout the day, help with that? I often say that time is the most precious currency that we have. So to really be able to set limits around our time so that, again, our time is going to where it needs to go. I often say when I coach clients in lean coaching, focus on the right thing at the right time.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we want to do. So
but again, it goes back to that knowing, right? So if you know that you have fantastic energy first thing in the morning, then what can you do to have your work or the thing that you are not crazy about happen when you've got the most energy?
Exactly. And for women, I would say especially, we have to we should consider our monthly cycle. I mean, men have a cycle too, by the way. I don't know if you know this or the audience know. They have a cycle too. It's just daily. So we don't see it as much because hormones fluctuate throughout the day and it's not as evident. But for women, with our monthly cycle, there are times during the month where we have naturally more energy than others. Right. So after our usual cycle, the week after, we usually have more energy. So what does that mean? What does that look like? Especially, I would say, for introverts. Like I'm an introvert. Takes a lot of energy to, have social events and just a lot of people around and whatnot. And so once I discovered that, I started planning more of the outings, let's say, the week after my period versus, before or during, when I just want to just be in a cocoon and rest, because that's what our body is doing. It's, kind of regenerating and wanting to rest. So those are really important things to consider, that we I feel like in general we've lost touch of.
Yeah, I think part of being a woman in the workplace, and
Yeah.
this is kind of all long past for me, but part of being a woman in the workplace is you kind of have to pretend that none of that's happening at all, right?
Right. Which is
Right.
not
So
true because it is.
apologies to the men listening, but when
Yeah.
we're running off to the ladies' room with a big purse, it's not because we have a lot of lipstick in there.
Yeah, and because and if we seem low for that week, well, it's because our bodies are doing something important,
Yeah,
and
but don't worry. Next week we're gonna
next week,
we're gonna be right on top of it. Yeah,
yes, full of
yeah,
energy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Take us to another one.
Okay, the third one is space. And so I'm sure, I mean, maybe you've heard the saying cluttered space, cluttered mind, or cluttered home, cluttered mind. For me, when I talk about space, it's not just physical space, it's also digital space. So when we talk about physical space in lean, we often go back to the 5 S's as a way to really, provide physical safety to the workplace. Now, in an office work environment, it's maybe less, because we coach people in the office, so it's maybe less prominent than on a, shop floor in manufacturing company. But still, you want things to be organized. And actually, when I went to Japan and some of the companies we visited, my goodness, they have 5S down packed to such a level, and they make it super creative and fun. One of the coolest things I saw was they had a series of binders. I don't remember what was in the binders, like maybe like reference material or whatnot. And they had a picture that covered basically all of the binders. And it was kind of like a puzzle. So if you take out a binder, you know where to put it back based on the picture. I don't know if that makes sense.
That is so much fun, right?
Yeah.
Right. So if you have a landscape, I guess, and it's missing an important mountain, then
then
you know right
okay,
where to stick it.
You know where to stick it. And I thought there was all these different things of people using their creativity to provide a space, not just that was safe, but also fun and functional, and you're never wondering, where is this supposed to go, or where is that thing? There's systems put in place to help each other out in the office environment. So I thought that was really, really cool. Yeah. And then from a digital perspective, well, we spend way too much time looking for information. So getting organized and even 5S'ing our digital world, I think is really, really important. And it sounds easier than it is, I think, because it can grow very quickly into the digital world. So, but it's really important because we don't want to waste any precious time just looking for information, so that we can do our work, which is oftentimes a big obstacle that I find when people are ready to do, especially that heads down work. It's like, oh, I have all this information to go and find, and that's a big step before they can do that heads down work. But it's exhausting because you're having to look everywhere for the information.
Yeah. And it's a really interesting going to the Gemba exercise to sit and watch somebody try to do that kind of work, and just see how many tabs did they have to open, and when they go to 3 or 4 different team sites to find something, are they working with a spreadsheet? They really can't see the spreadsheet that peering at it. You can learn so much.
Yeah.
And you could you could learn that about yourself too.
Definitely. Yeah, so that's a little bit about the space, but ultimately getting organized and keeping things where they belong. This is another saying that I love, is everything in its place, right? Everything has a home. And if it doesn't have a home, well, You got to make a choice. Again, we are limited on space, and maybe it feels less so from a digital perspective, but there is a limit on space in our digital world.
Well,
as
and
well.
it costs money to keep that space. And another
Yeah.
thing that I recently became aware of from an environmental perspective, when you think about it, maintaining that space is really requires electrical power and
Yeah.
requires electrical power generation. So everything that we're putting up into the cloud is actually also impacting our environment. So something
Great
additional
point.
to think about. Yeah.
Yes.
Like, what are we keeping and why are we keeping it?
Yes. Yes.
Of course, all my family pictures are extremely important, and I need to keep them forever.
Definitely.
All right. So that was 3, Stéfany. Tell me about
Yeah.
number 4.
Well, number 4 is capacity.
Capacity.
And
So this is so fascinating because capacity is, you know, that is a really important thing we often forget about when we're doing process flow work in the workplace.
Yeah. And this is an interesting one because it also goes back to the knowing, right? And the imagery that I like to use is, think about a stove, your stovetop, right? Your stovetop, usually your typical stovetop has 4 what's it called? Burners. Thank you. I had the French word in my head. The four burners. Some are smaller, some are bigger, right? You also have your oven. You may have 2 racks in your oven, maybe 3. I don't know if you got a fancy oven. Ultimately, the stove, the oven has a specific capacity. There is no way you can cook more pots on top of your stove than it has the space for it, unless you do, one at a time, right? But if you're doing it all at the same time, there's only so much that stove can handle, right? Us humans are the same way, but we forget that we have a limited capacity. And I think that I would say that society in general, we kind of preach these, superhero, let's do everything kind of personas. And so we aim to be these people who can do everything any time of the day for anyone. And if I just jump to it, I can do it for you. But we forget to really consider what is our actual capacity from an individual perspective, even from a family perspective, from a team's perspective, right? I mean, every individual is different. Again, we have unique needs, we have unique capacity, right? Your stovetop may have 6 burners, and that's what you can handle. And that's great. As long as you never go over those 6 burners. And me, if I have 4 or even 3, that's actually okay too. This is who I am. And so finding that sweet spot and balance between knowing the capacity and not overdoing it based on, again, the other elements as well, when it comes to focus and time and space, being able to know what your capacity, what your capability is, how much can you actually handle, is really, really, really important.
Right. Because the minute you go over, and we know this from working on workflow in the workplace, the minute you go over, you start to create problems that actually start to compound upon themselves. And it's very difficult to get back to that level flow.
Yeah. I love that. Yes.
Yeah. Wow. So focus. Let me see. Okay, I got this right. So focus, time, capacity, and some other one, Stéfany. Space. Focus, time, capacity, and space.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Super. Wow. And can you just quickly, you just came back from a trip with Katie Anderson to Japan, and I'm sure you could talk about that for about a week.
Definitely.
But have you had time to think about, like, what's your one big takeaway from that trip?
Oh my goodness, there's just so many, and I've been trying to just still digest digest everything that we saw, everything that we experienced, all the conversations. And I think the richness is not just in, being there in Japan, being able to see it for ourselves and all the presentations from amazing leaders that were shared, but it's also the connections created with the other participants and their insights in terms of how they're experiencing, the same experience, but from their perspective. There's so much richness there. And one of my favorite quotes that just keeps replaying in my mind is from Dr. Oh, now I'm going to get his name. Give me 2 seconds. He was a doctor at oh, now I'm getting super baby brain. There's a Red Cross hospital where he did a lot of amazing work. And he said that anyone can be a great leader if you're studious. And that just has been on my mind since then. And I would love to explore with him what exactly he meant by studious. And I've been thinking about that word a lot, especially in the leadership coaching that I do, and encouraging upcoming leaders that you can be a leader. It's, there's this concept of, are you a natural born leader or can it be learned? And I think it's both. There are some people who are naturally born leaders and those who and then need to keep up with the skills, and then those who really have to put in more effort to learning it. And so for me, when he said that, I was thinking about that. I was thinking about if you want to be a leader and be effective, you have to be serious about sort of the craft of leadership. And that includes, going to the Gemba, having those solid practices, making work visible, talking about or creating a safe space to talk about problems, listening to people, showing them that you care. We had amazing presentations by Mr. Isao Yoshino, who was a 40-year manager at Toyota, and just all of the things that he shared was like, ultimately, if you want to be a leader, you have to be serious. And when I think about that and, the whole concept of staying focused and the 4 key elements, to me, it just links beautifully, because as a leader supporting your team, you have to be able to set limits on everything that's not essential, everything that's trying to distract away from the purpose, the true intention of, your company, your team, your raison d'être, as we would say in French, and really help people flow that value, help those value creators flow that value. So much to say, so much to share. It was an incredible experience. I highly recommend it to anyone who's considering it, to go, on a Japan study tour with Katie Anderson. And it's not just learning about lean, but it's also the impacts of the Japanese culture as well. Like, I learned so much.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that, just that little taste. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Stéfany, how can people find your book?
All right. Well, my new ebook is available at go.stephanieoliver.com. So I will spell it out because my parents were very creative when I was born and they wrote my name differently than most. So it's go.stephanieoliver.com. And people can also check out my website, which is just stephanieoliver.com. We didn't get a chance to talk about my cookbook, but that was
while ago now. That was the other thing about the Japan trip was all of your posts about what you ate.
Yeah.
That was fantastic too. I was like, Stéfany and the amazing food that she cooks and the healthy way she thinks about food is a whole other thing for people who don't know how to explore.
Yeah, definitely.
So check all that out. So Stéfany, what is your one piece of advice to a young person starting out?
Well, I feel like we've talked a lot about knowing your limits, knowing yourself. And I mean, looking back, I mean, this has been part of my journey of discovering all of that. And I also wish sometimes I knew myself a little bit better when I was 20, early 20s, especially. I got into a few moments of my life where I got really overwhelmed, like so close to burning out, if not actually burning out, and just being in denial about it. So going back on those lessons and thinking, oh, if only I had known what I needed, right? And put the discipline in place to allow myself and give myself permission and grace to actually take that. I think that's really important. And again, it's not necessarily to shut out everyone else or to set limits in a way that's like, well, I'm not going to do that for you. It's more like, these are the things that I need in order for me to have wellness in my life, to be focused and to live out that purpose. So knowing yourself and having the discipline and the grace and the kindness towards yourself to actually follow through with those boundaries around the needs that you have, I think is really important.
So knowing yourself. And that it's a constant journey. And as you said earlier, you're going to change throughout your life. So it's got to be, I think, about continuing to relearn about yourself.
Yeah. And then you get into the whole PDCA cycle, right?
Yeah, which we love.
Yeah. Experiment your way through, improvement in order to get there, and continuously be aware of how is that changing over time. Like, I have a baby coming. That might change. I might need more than 20 minutes in the morning,
And it might be a little harder to get. But
yeah. But everyone's got to be on board to help me get it, because that will make everyone happier.
Oh, well, Stéfany, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation and wish you all the best with the baby, and look forward to seeing what you do next.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Have a blessed day.
This is Bella Engelbach, and I'd like to thank Stéfany Oliver for being my guest at the Edges of Lean. What did you learn from this conversation? What ideas did it spark? We would love to hear from you. Find Stéfany at StéphanyOliver.com or on LinkedIn, and find her book at go.StéphanyOliver.com/Stay Flowcused ebook. Find me on LinkedIn at leanforhumans.com, or comment wherever you watch or listen. And check out my friends in the Lean Communicators community at leancommunicators.com, where you'll find lots of great new content every week. The Edges of Lean is written and produced by Bella Engelbach with support from Podcast Inc. This is a Lean for Humans production.